Most of you likely know that not all clones were created equal. Some of Jango Fett's replicas were genetically enhanced or trained differently so as to fulfill a different purpose. Of all the variant clones out there, perhaps the most iconic were the Advanced Recon Commandos or ARC Troopers. These legendary soldiers were few in number but invaluable to the generals under which they served, and they played crucial roles in many Republic victories. But what exactly made the ARCS different from normal clones? In this video, we'll be discussing just that.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First things first, we need to distinguish between three types of ARC Trooper. The first ARCs were the Null-class, 6 experimental troopers with their own unique history. We've discussed them in detail in earlier videos and we won't be discussing them today. The second group of ARCs was the Alpha class, 100 elite clones who represented the absolute best the Grand Army of the Republic had to offer. Notable Alpha class ARCs included Alpha 17 and Captain Fordo. There was also a third group of ARCs, the largest by far, regular clones who were promoted to ARC ranks for their skill and independence. This latter group included all or most of the ARCs we saw in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Let's start by looking at the Alphas. As Clone Commandos put it, the Alpha class ARC Troopers were pretty much pure Jango. The Kaminoans even took it a step further by having them all trained personally by Jango himself, which shaped the Alphas into some of the greatest soldiers in the galaxy. They became so effective that the Kaminoans became afraid of them, and once their training was completed, the Alphas were put into stasis into Poker City to be released only in case of emergency. There were only 100 Alphas, 99 really, since Alpha 2 deserted shortly before the outbreak of the Clone Wars, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in exceptional skill. One 10-man squad, the Munilinst 10, was able to go behind enemy lines during the Battle of Munilinst, scale the enemy command center, and destroy its artillery defenses. They cut through dozens of droids and even a tank on their way to do so, and they only lost one trooper in the process. On top of that, they did all of this without being noticed. Mun commanders believed that their defensive were destroyed by Republic artillery and panicked about the range of the SPH-ATs, while Captain Fordo and his men vibed on the roof and waited for General Kenobi. While regular clone troopers were definitely well trained, it goes without saying that the regs weren't nearly that skilled. The Alpha class ARCs were, in many ways, perfect soldiers, capable of extraordinary feats that sometimes even rivaled those of the Jedi. And unlike with the Republic's clone commandos, this didn't owe much to their equipment. By and large, ARC troopers just used optimized versions of standard clone gear, with a few customizations and occasionally some unique weapons. Their increased effectiveness was almost entirely a result of their training and skill. Alpha class ARCs also differed wildly from the regs in terms of attitude. Clone troopers were genetically modified to be very collective-minded, as the Kaminoans believed was fitting for soldiers. They were taught to view themselves not as individuals but as pieces of a greater whole, and they were trained to rely on each other heavily in combat. Even clone commandos, who by and large were much more independent than their common brethren, were trained to see their squads as a whole person, of which they were just a part. But this wasn't the case for ARC troopers. The Alphas wholly retained Jango Fett's sense of independence, which the Kaminoans considered bordering on sociopathic. They largely worked best alone or in small groups, and they always thought for themselves. They never pulled any punches when it came to questioning their superiors, and their intuition on tactical matters was almost always spot on, as their Jedi generals quickly learned. The Alphas also retained Jango Fett's personality, and Alpha 17 in particular was notorious for his cynicism and dark sense of humor. This often led to clashes with the Jedi, many of whom found the Alphas to be disturbingly extreme in their approach to combat. This dislike was typically mutual. Many of the Alphas came to believe the Jedi didn't have the guts to do what needed to be done, which they often defined as sacrificing or even outright murdering innocents as a tactical move. As the Clone Wars dragged on, it quickly became apparent that the Republic needed a lot more than a measly 100 ARC troopers. Alpha 17 made his own bid to rectify the problem, starting a program on Kamino to retrain clone commanders to think more like ARCs. Many of the clones we all know and love went through this program, including Captain Rex and Commander Cody, who met as part of Alpha's first class. But the Republic also started retraining regular clone troopers to serve as ARCS as well, and these retrainees quickly came to make up the majority of ARC troopers. This begs an interesting question. What made a clone trooper viable for retraining? We know of 3 ARC troopers who became ARCs in this manner: Fives, Echo, and Jesse. It's likely Colt, Havoc, and Blitz, the ARC commanders who participated in the defense of Kamino, were retrained regs as well. All of these clones were quite different from each other, but there was a common trait they shared that, in all likelihood, was what the Republic was looking for in its ARC troopers. They all thought in unique ways. Fives was unorthodox, a highly independent clone who would stop at nothing to do what he believed was right. Echo was obsessed with data and regulations, but he was by no means beholden to them. Jesse was a medic who was used to planning how to save as many lives as possible in a battle. Each of these clones brought something unique to the table, and it was likely that which led them to being chosen as ARCs over the likes of Captain Rex. Rex may have been unique and independent in his own right, but never to the extremes these clones went to. Those extremes are what set them aside as ARC troopers. At the heart of it all, that's what was most important about ARC troopers. In a sense, what set them apart from regular clones was simply the fact that they were noticeably different. In an army of one man, being unique was a distinctive feature, and it made the ARCs valuable because it allowed them to bring new perspectives and outlooks to the table. The other clones had very similar perspectives due to how they were trained, and the Jedi also typically had very similar perspectives due to how they were trained. But ARCs brought something unique to the table, which is why they were so valuable to the Republic. We mentioned earlier that the original Alpha class ARCs were absolutely ruthless in how they criticized their superiors, and that it usually helped the Republic in a battle. Originally, these ARCs were invaluable because they provided the experience and perspectives of Jango Fett, which drew a sharp contrast to how other clones thought and how the Jedi thought. They had tactical and practical know-how that both the Jedi and the other clones didn't, which the Grand Army of the Republic sorely needed. Over time, the ARCs also came to be valuable for their own perspectives, as developed by their experience in the war. When the Republic started recruiting regs to retrain as ARCs, they were looking for more of those individual perspectives. They didn't really care that the new ARCs had wildly different personalities and training than the originals, and they didn't care that they were generally inferior soldiers either. They weren't looking for super soldiers, they were looking for more experience. The greatest value they saw in ARC troopers was perspective. They were seen as experts and they were generally sent wherever their expertise was most needed. This is also why ARC troopers were given such a unique role in the Grand Army of the Republic. It's not made all that clear in the Clone Wars, but ARC troopers were never attached to any particular unit, unlike clone commanders. They operated alone or in small groups of ARCs, which were attached to large units in advisory positions. They were sent in to supplement the leadership units that needed it. What exactly this meant could vary. Some ARCs, like Alpha 17, were attached to specific Jedi generals for short stints, while others, like Fordo and the Munilins 10, were attached to units for individual battles or missions. The Clone Wars does actually acknowledge this, briefly at the start of the Umbara arc. During the opening phase of the battle, Fives is referred to as an ARC trooper accompanying the 501st, not an actual member of the unit. So that's what made ARC troopers different from their normie counterparts, but what do you think? Who's your favorite ARC trooper and why is it Alpha 17? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, if you want to join our wider Geetsly's community and play as an ARC trooper, you can join us on our Geetsly's gaming network where we have our Clone Wars Gmod server and our Jedi vs Sith Gmod server up and running. And you can also join us on our Discord to chat to myself and other Star Wars fans. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.